The cold dining room echoed with laughter, not happiness, but contempt. Daniel leaned back in his chair, smiling at his father. "Dad, come on and admit it, you're embarrassed. All my friends' daddies have luxuries cars, but you. You can't even purchase a bicycle without perspiring." Adrian snorted. "Don't compare to real men, Daniel. He's not a father to begin with. Look at his shirt, cobbled together like some street bum." The boys erupted into spiteful laughter. Ethan Cole ate slowly, looking down, remaining silent. Silence had been ingrained into his soul through years of ridicule, yet tonight the words cut more, for they came not from strangers, but from the flesh of his own kin. Lila Carter, his wife, set down her wine glass with a sharp clink. Her eyes, cold as ice, pierced through him. "They're right, Ethan. You're a man with no ambition. No career. No respect. You've wasted the best years of my life." "Mom's right," Daniel sneered. "If you just married Mr. Hayes. He's the complete opposite of Dad in every sense, powerful, successful, respected. And let's face it, Mom, he's a man." Adrian choked on his food once again, laughing. "To be the son of this man. People actually pity us, Dad. Do you know how humiliating that is?" Lila leaned in, venom seeping from her voice. "Ethan, do you ever wonder why I barely even glance at you anymore? Why the boys don't respect you? Because you've never given us even one reason to. Victor Hayes spends more on me in one night than you've spent on me in a lifetime." Slowly, he lifted his head, his eyes never leaving hers. "Lila. I've been here, every day. Doing what I can, giving what I. Giving." Lila snapped, her laughter harsh. "Giving shame. Giving misery. You are no husband, Ethan. No father. Nothing." Daniel slapped the table, his voice loud. "We'd rather be known as Victor's father. At least he has the guts and the money to take care of us. What do we have, Dad? Silence and an empty wallet." Adrian chimed in, stabbing at him as if taunting a stranger. "If you had a dash of pride, you'd leave this house and never come back. You're just invisible." The words struck Ethan's heart, weighed more than lead. He rose, the scraping of the chair on the ground. Mocking laughter from his sons hung in the air, yet he did not flinch. He loomed over them, his shadow a long cast across the table. His words carried weight for the first time in years, deep and level like the growl of thunder on the horizon. "You taunt me now. You laugh at things you cannot see. But one day, when truth comes, you will remember these words: I was here the whole time, here, but invisible." His eyes stayed on Lila, her smirk trembling for the first time. Then, saying nothing, Ethan turned and was gone from sight, the door shut behind him, a sound that echoed back like a warning. The family laughed harder, believing they had broken him to pieces. But in the background, where empires slept and secrets lurked, the storm had only begun. The Carter Group's boardroom was in shambles. Towers of files littered the floor, voices echoed in desperation, and the smell of defeat hung heavy in the air. Lila Carter gripped the far end of the long glass table with her fingers hard into its polished surface, her eyes blazing with fury. "Waste of time," she shouted, her voice echoing in the room. "All of you are an embarrassment. How could you let the partnership with Silvertech get away from us? Do you folks have brains in your head, or are you here just to warm seats?" An executive faltered, "And Madam Carter, we tried our best, but their conditions." "Your best?" Lila cut in, her tone bitter. "Your best is failure. Do you think Silvertech cares about excuses? Do you think Victor Hayes loses clients with best? No. He gains them while you buffoons lag behind him like a shadow." Suffocating silence prevailed in the room. Some of the employees lowered their heads, others clenched their jaws, but no one uttered a word. Lila's breasts heaved and fell in rage. She threw a folder onto the table with so much force the papers burst outward like white confetti. "This company bleeds because of your incompetence. If it weren't for me, the name Carter would be buried 6 feet deep by now. And yet, I am surrounded by idiots who can't even close one single deal." Her words were venom, each syllable designed to sting. The board members exchanged uneasy glances, their resentment growing, but fear kept them quiet. Just then, her phone buzzed. Victor's name flashed across the screen. Lila's expression softened for only a second before she turned it over and forced a cold smile. Meeting this afternoon. No excuses. We'll salvage this mess, or heads will roll. The employees scattered like frightened birds. By afternoon, the boardroom was filled again, tension thicker than ever. Lila stormed in, dripping with her typical arrogance, though her complexion looked whiter under harsh lights. Now, she began, pacing like a queen over her court, let's discuss our next move. I don't care if you crawl on bended knee, we will not see Silvertech go unpunished. If you fools cannot. Her voice suddenly deserted her. A burning pain shot through her side. She reached for her waist, gasping. The room blurred. Madam Carter, somebody yelled, alarmed. She tried to wave it aside, but her knees buckled. Gasps echoed through the air as she hit the floor, trembling. Get an ambulance, someone screamed. Chairs scraped back, alarm seeping into the room. Give her space, back off, somebody else yelled, crouching beside her. Lila's eyes snapped open, her lips white. Don't. Let Hayes see me weak, she gasped, and fell back unconscious. The room was shocked into immobility. The Queen of Fire, the woman who had mocked them mere hours before, now lay helpless on the cold boardroom floor. Paramedics stormed in within minutes, carrying her away on a stretcher as the staff stood wordlessly aghast. As the door closed behind them, the room was abuzz with whispers. Kidney failure. She was sick-looking 4 weeks. If Victor finds out about it. But no one dared to whisper above a whisper. For the first time in history, Lila Carter's empire was shaken, not by her enemies, but by the discovery that her own body had betrayed her. The sirens had barely vanished when hospital corridor erupted into a whirlwind of furtive footsteps and hushed whispers. Doctors and nurses rushed to the emergency room, but piercing the chaos was a commanding voice, smooth, self-assured, and dripping with authority. Make way. Victor Hayes arrived like a king in his own castle. He was dressed in a navy, custom-made suit, his gold cufflinks flashing off the fluorescent lights, and walked past the nurses, ignoring protocol. Even his arrival made the staff freeze in their tracks. I am Victor Hayes, he stated in a no-nonsense way. She is under my care. Do not hold back any cost. If you need equipment, medication, specialists, I will cover it all. The head nurse faltered. Sir, are you family? I told you, Victor's voice turned tougher, I steal cold, money is no problem. Do as I say. The ring of command in his tone stamped out every one of their protests. Within minutes, a train of specialists was summoned, hurrying into the ward where Lila slept. Within, Lila was agitated softly, eyes opening to the sight of Victor's towering figure standing beside her hospital bed. His hand on the edge of the bed, his face set precisely between concern and restraint. Victor. Her voice was weak but laced with relief. Victor leaned forward, his voice low so that it became a calming whisper heavy with perfectly simulated sincerity. Don't worry, Lila. I'm here now. You'll be okay. I'm not going to let anything happen to you. Tears welled at the corners of her eyes, not tears of distress, but of wry sarcasm. Her husband had not called. Her sons were in exile. But Victor, the man her heart always pitted Ethan against, stood before her. You came, she gasped. Of course, Victor said softly, brushing a curl of wet hair back from her forehead. When others fail you, remember, I never will. Outside the glass partition of the ward, Carter Group staff stood in hushed clusters, watching the drama unfold. Mr. Hayes appeared before even the husband, one murmured. He acts more like her real family than Ethan does, another complained. In all honesty, she would do better to have a man like Hayes. The murmurs grew, lighting the fire of embarrassment that Ethan hadn't even faced so far. Meanwhile, Ethan remained in his blackout study, ignorant of the chaos. His phone remained inactive on the desk. Nobody had thought about calling him. Not his wife. Not his sons. Not even her aides. Ethan Cole was invisible to everyone else already. The ring of a personal phone shattered the silence of Ethan Cole's study. He frowned. Only one person knew that number. "Sir," the voice on the other end, low, urgent, almost hesitating. "Something has happened. Madam Carter fainted during a meeting. She's been admitted to Green Valley Hospital." The words knocked Ethan flat. For a moment, he couldn't catch his breath. He sprang to his feet, the chair clattering over behind him. "What did you say?" "She fainted in front of everyone." The situation looked bad. "I thought you'd want to hear first before the media does." Without hesitation, Ethan rushed to grab his jacket from the rack and shot out of the house. His mind was a whirlwind: worry, fear, regret, and an escalating fear he couldn't define. The hospital corridors buzzed with chatter when he arrived, his steps hurried, almost frantic. Nurses and staff glanced his way but didn't greet him. Instead, whispers rippled through the crowd like poison. Look at him, finally decided to show up. Too late. Victor Hayes was here long before him. Honestly, how can Madam Carter endure such a useless husband? If it were me, I'd have left him years ago. Each whisper was a dagger. Ethan's knuckles curled into fists, but he didn't break, not letting their disdain slow him down. He stepped into the ward and stopped. Behind the glass, he could see Victor Hayes towering over by Lila's bed, whispering softly into her ear as if he were entitled. Carter Group staff milled around outside in groups, some even smiling at the spectacle. "See how he takes care of her," one of them whispered. "That's what a real man looks like," another replied. And her husband? Standing there like a ghost. Ethan pushed forward, but a nurse stepped into his path. "Sir, please, only family is allowed inside right now." His chest tightened. His voice cracked with desperation. "I am her family. I'm her husband." The nurse's expression wavered, caught between pity and professionalism. Before she could reply, Lila's faint voice floated through the half-open door. "Victor, thanks. You're the only one I can trust." The words sliced deeper into Ethan than any insult. For the first time in years, his mask of serenity shivered on the brink of shattering. He turned his face away, swallowing the flame burning his throat. No one saw the storm in his eyes, the storm of a man everybody wrote off as worthless, who stood humbly while the world ridiculed him. But the storm was building. Antiseptic scent filled the hospital halls, but worse than the stench, it was the whispers. "That's her husband. Ah, no wonder she fainted. Useless man can't even protect his wife. If I were her, I would have left him long ago." Every word stung him, as knives thrown into his heart. He clenched his fists but pressed on, fighting not to crumple in front of their contempt. When Ethan arrived at the private ward, his sons were there waiting. Daniel, the elder, paced back and forth with red, puffy eyes. Lucas, the younger son, huddled in a chair, his little fists clenched, quietly sobbing. "Daniel, Lucas," Ethan breathed softly, his voice heavy with remorse as he tried to put a hand on Daniel's shoulder. But Daniel pushed it away. His eyes blazed with the same vitriol Ethan had been dodging for so long. "Don't you touch me." Daniel spat, his voice trembling. "If you had an ounce of responsibility, Mom wouldn't be on that bed today." Ethan stepped back, shocked. I didn't know." "Sure you didn't." Daniel yelled. "You never know anything because you're too afraid to face excuses. You're useless, Dad. Useless." Lucas, sobbing, continued, "Uncle Victor was here already. He had Mom's hand, calling the doctors, getting everything done." "Where were you, Dad?" Ethan's mouth trembled. "I came as soon as I heard." "Too late," Daniel cut him off sharply. His eyes narrowed into puddles of contempt. "You know what, Dad? I'd be happier to have Uncle Victor as a father. At least he is a man we can trust." The words struck Ethan like a bullet to the chest. He felt the ground shake beneath him, his breath cut off by the ferocity of his own blood. For an infinite moment, he just stood there, helpless, unable to shield himself. Behind the glass partition of the ward, Ethan saw his wife lying on the hospital bed. White, bony, unconscious. And there, beside her, was Victor, grasping one hand, his face creased with worry, behaving like the perfect husband Ethan had failed to be. Ethan's heart shattered, but he held his own grief at bay, for in this room, he didn't even exist yet. Ethan leaned against the cold of the hospital wall, his chest heaving from the daggered words of his sons. His hands shook, not with anger, but with the hollow within him. He had labored years carrying their burdens, working in silence in the background, playing deaf when his wife mocked him in public, playing dumb when his children mocked him. He reminded himself it was worth it, that sacrifice was love. Today, though, love had spit on him. His phone throbbed in his pocket. He considered ignoring it for a moment, he had no strength left for yet another put down. But the name on the screen stopped him. Mr. Harris, attorney. He swallowed hard before answering. Mr. Harris. Ethan, the lawyer's voice was stern but calm, almost desperate. I've called you for weeks. Your father, who died, left me his will, your legacy. You've been gallivanting trying to impress people who don't care about you, but the men who saved you, who treated you like his own son, left you his entire empire. His empire is waiting for you. But time is running out. Ethan's knees had nearly given way. His adopted father, the sole human being to ever treat him with kindness. The men who'd rescued him from the gutter and given him a name. A family, if not by birth. And he'd thrown away that legacy. For what? For a wife who cursed him. For sons who despised him. For a brother who ridiculed him. Mr. Harris's voice insistently continued. Ethan, your father believed in you because he perceived strength in you, a strength that the world has helped you to forget. Come visit me. Take back what is yours, or it will be taken from you. Ethan closed his eyes, pain building into something sharper, colder. He glanced once more at the door to the ward where his wife lay, Victor sitting faithfully beside her. His sons stood grouped behind him, as if he were the true father. The image seared itself into Ethan's heart. And in that instant, he understood, the world was merciless to the weak. No one respected sacrifice. They only bowed to power. Straightening his back, Ethan finally breathed differently. He wasn't going to beg anymore. Send me the address, Mr. Harris, Ethan said quietly, his voice no longer trembling but edged with resolve. I'll come see you. And for the first time in years, as he walked out of the hospital under the harsh intonations of scorn, Ethan was not shattered. He was reanimated. As the sound of Ethan's footsteps dwindled down the hospital corridor, the atmosphere in his wife's ward grew a twisted sort of celebration. Victor loomed over the end of the bed, radiating concern and assurance. He placed a reassuring hand on Daniel's shoulder. Don't cry anymore, Daniel, Victor guided softly, his tone chock full of command. Your mother is strong. She'll ride out this. And you too, he looked at Daniel and Lucas, his tone replete with certainty, will be her strength. She doesn't need pain. She doesn't need weakness around her. She needs the best. Daniel wiped away his tears on the palm of his hand, nodding hastily. Lucas sniffled and clung to Victor's coat for all he was worth. Victor got down to their level now, his words dripping like honey-coated poison. Come along, boys. Do you really think a man like Ethan can give her what she's worthy of? You've seen it yourselves, always behind time, always in need, always one step back. Your mother is a queen. She deserves a king at her side, not an imitator. Daniel's fists clenched. You're right, Uncle. Dad, he's no use. He doesn't even have a clue what's happening around him. If it weren't for you, Mom would be dead already. Victor smiled feebly, running his hand through the boy's hair. That's why you must trust me. I'll never allow your mother or either of you to suffer. Unlike him, I'll give you all that you require. Just then, a nurse entered with lab results. The boys, newly famished by the ache of their loss, rushed to Victor for comfort instead of their own father. Witnessing the tableau caused the staff to exchange knowing looks, the murmurs of, useless husband, in crescendo. Outside the glass window of the ward, Ethan was unseen for a last moment. His heart shattered as he saw his sons holding the very man who was ruining his family, his wife's pale face turned towards Victor as if he was her savior. No one noticed Ethan. No one gave a damn. For years, he had sacrificed his back, given up on hope, endured insults, all to sustain this family. And in one arrogant afternoon, he had been eliminated, replaced by his brother. Ethan repressed his pain, turned, and walked away without speaking a word. He had finally understood, to them, he was dead already. But in the silence of that stroll, something awakened within him. His family might have chosen Victor. But soon the world would learn Ethan Black. The constant beep of the heart monitor filled the room until Lila's eyelids gradually opened. Her chest rose on a shallow breath, her eyes foggy but quickly clearing as she recognized where she was. "Mom." Daniel and Lucas cried in unison, dashing to her bedside. They clutched her arms, their small faces smudged with tears. Victor stepped forward smoothly, his muscular physique commanding. He brushed the hair from her forehead, his voice soothing. "Don't fret, Lila. You fainted, but you're fine now. The doctors have gotten you stabilized. Rest easy, I'll take care of everything." Lila blinked up at him, gratitude softening her usually sharp eyes. "Victor, you were here." "From the beginning," he stated, his pride thickening his voice. "I called the doctors. I prevented your sons from being alone. And that crisis in the office? Do not worry. I have connections with members of the board of the partner company. I'll take care of it for you." Her lips trembled as she whispered, "You do that, for me. Always." His voice was low, soothing, reassuring. He leaned in closer, and the sparkles of her tears caught his eye. In the moment of exposure, their eyes locked, and Victor's hand remained on hers a fraction too long. The boys, watching, nodded frantically. "Uncle Victor will see to everything, Mom. Don't worry about Dad. He can't." Victor smiled, drinking in their trust, leaning in as though to embrace Lila. The ward door swung open. "Lila." Ethan burst in, his face flushed with relief, his eyes shining. He rushed forward, breathless, happiness spilling out of him. "You're awake, thank God, you're awake." He darted to her side, reaching for her hands, desperate to touch her, to assure himself she was truly alive. But Lila's face hardened instantly. She jerked her hands away from his grasp as though his touch burned her. "Where were you?" she snapped, fury evident in her voice. "When I fell, when I needed someone to take care of me, where were you, Ethan?" Ethan came to a halt, words paralyzed in his throat. She pointed at Victor and her children, crying tears all over again. "It was Victor who stayed. It was my children who stood by me. And you. My own husband." Her voice dissolved into a sob. "It's bad enough you're good for nothing, can't even keep a job. But now. Now you don't even care whether I live or die. What did I ever do to deserve such a husband?" Her sobs filled the room, their heavy sound bearing the gravity of her grief. Victor was not slow in slipping an arm around her shoulders, whispering, "Don't try too hard, Lila. I'm here. You can't waste your tears on someone who doesn't care for you." Daniel looked at Ethan with hatred in his eyes, his voice trembling with rage. "Just leave, Dad. You're just a bother to Mom." Lucas clung to Victor's sleeve, whimpering, "Uncle Victor, don't make Mom cry again." Ethan was rooted to the spot, his breast held under their contempt. His hands trembled, his mouth aghast to speak something, yet nothing came out. All that he could see was his wife leaning on the shoulder of another man, his boys clinging to that other man, and the entire room looking at him like a stranger. The lights in the ward dimmed to a soft glow, the nurses shutting the doors between visits until the disturbance had passed. Lila lay back on her pillows, exhaustion etched on her features, as Daniel and Lucas slept restless in chairs next to her. Victor remained, his posture firm, borders on smug, sitting at the bedside. When the silence was stretched too far, he finally spoke up, his voice low and measured. "Lila," he said smoothly, "you don't have to worry about the collapse at the office anymore. I'll take care of it." She looked at him, weary eyes glistening. "Victor, this deal with Crescent Technologies was critical. Losing it means the board will turn against me." Victor gave a calm chuckle, leaning forward. "And that's why I'll open a new door for you. Bigger, stronger, more reliable than Crescent could ever be." Her eyebrows furrowed. "What's going on?" They waited and let him have his moment before he punched them. "The Azards Group." Lila gasped for breath. Despite her sickness, the name struck like thunder. "The Azards? That is impossible. We've been trying to get their attention all these years. They don't even take notice of our offers." Victor snarled. That's because you made Ethan attempt to handle it. He spit out the word as if it were venom. Do you think a man like that would ever make it to the Azards? No. But me. I have contacts. People who respect me. If I take care of this, you'll have their money and their compliance in no time. Lila's lips trembled. She sought out his hand instinctively, tears rising once again. Victor, if you can really do this, you'll save me. You'll save the company. You'll save everything. He grasped her hand in a tight hold, his own eyes holding hers firmly with unshakable conviction. I'll do it, Lila. Not for glory, but because you deserve the best. And I won't let you or the boys down. Daniel shifted in his seat and spoke sleepily. Uncle Victor always does what he promises. Lucas nodded feebly, even in slumber. He's the father we need. Victor's self-satisfaction increased, pride swelling in his chest. To him, the victory was already won. He had Lila's trust, the children's subordination, and soon, the Azard's favor. What they did not know was that fate had already altered. The empire that they admired, the Azard's group, was no longer under Victor's control. It was in Ethan's hands. And as they clung to Victor's delusions, Ethan was working towards reclaiming the throne that would have the entire world, including them, bow at his feet. The night air was cold, but Ethan walked haphazardly down the dark streets, his coat hanging loosely about his shoulders. The world faded away from him, the neon lights, the blurring automobiles, the soft murmur of strangers, all drowned out by the overwhelming weight of his thoughts. Every word, every slur of that hospital echoed in his mind like a bitter refrain. Useless husband. A burden to Mom. Uncle Victor is the father we need. He stopped at a park bench, sitting heavily and hiding his face in his hands. The tears running down his face were not for the betrayal alone, they were for the lost years. Years spent enduring curses, humiliation, and unspoken sacrifices, all for a family that had welcomed another man without hesitation. He recalled Lila's cold stare as she brushed his hands away. Daniel's toxin, Lucas's rejection. Victor's satisfied arm draped over the woman he once vowed to protect. And then he recalled the divorce papers Lila had hurled at him weeks ago. He had torn them apart, clinging to the illusion of family, refusing to let it go. But this night broke him. Fists clenched, for the first time a cold fury washed over him. She wants a divorce. She'll have one. His voice trembled, but not with fear, with resolve. I won't grovel again. I won't be taken advantage of again. With a slow smile, his lip curled upwards. When the truth is known, when they see what I am really like, they'll gag on every insult they spat at me. He lifted his head, eyes aglow with a new passion. Ethan Black was no more. Something greater would arise now. The next day, after tossing the choice around in his head for hours, he stood before a gleaming glass tower. The brass letters gleamed above the entrance, Harris and Cole Attorneys. For eternity, he remained on the steps, looking at the reflection of his haggard face in the glass doors. This was the final step, the moment that would set everything right. Some part of him continued to shake with doubt, fearing the unknown, fearing a repeated failure. But then he remembered Lila's sobbing, the curses of his sons, the rumors of strangers in the hospital corridor. He breathed deeply, straightened his back, and clenched his fists. No more weakness. No more shame. The Harris and Cole Attorneys' gleaming oak doors swung shut behind Ethan with a quiet thud, imprisoning him in a marble-floored, hushed-voiced universe. Every step he took echoed through the large hallway until he stood in front of the office at the other end. Come in, a commanding voice invited after a knock. Ethan entered, and there sat Mr. Harris, the man who had been trying to reach him for weeks. Silver-haired, sharp-eyed, dressed in an impeccable suit, the lawyer radiated authority. Behind him, tall shelves stacked with thick legal binders loomed like silent guardians. Ethan, Mr. Harris said, rising to shake his hand. At last. His grip was strong, his gaze piercing. I wondered if you'd ever come. Ethan dropped down into the chair, shoulders clenched, his heart racing. I wasn't ready beforehand. But now I am. The lawyer regarded him for a moment before settling back in his seat. That's what I want to hear, are you ready? Because what your late adoptive father has left behind is not merely wealth. It is an empire. A throne which demands more than the ability to survive. It demands power. Ruthlessness. Leadership. Ethan's throat closed. I know I've been weak. Mr. Harris dismissed him with a waved hand. Weakness will not hold the Izards group on their throne. Do you understand the scope of this? Your father trusted you, Ethan. Not as his blood, but because he saw fire in you. Fire I don't see here now. The words sliced, but Ethan did not flinch this time. He grasped the armrest, his voice rough but firm. I've been mocked. Embarrassed. Treated like less than a human being. I let them do it because I thought love would be enough. But I was mistaken. He stood tall, his eyes icy. I will not kneel. If the world only is going to respect strength, then I will be stronger than they all. I will stand up for what belongs to me, no matter how many things I must dismantle to get there. There was a flash of approval on Mr. Harris's face for the first time. He tapped his pen on the desk, his head leaning slowly. That is the answer I was expecting. He opened a leather briefcase and slid a thick folder across the table. Gold-stamped letters read, "The Izards Group, Transfer of Power." Ethan's breath was taken as he gazed at the papers. His fingers trembled as he held out his hand, no longer in terror but with the overwhelming burden of fate looming over them. This, Mr. Harris announced, his voice weighed with seriousness, is your true legacy. Your father did not leave you just his wealth, but the dominion of the most powerful conglomerate in this nation. The Izards report to nobody, and now you won't either. Ethan's head snapped up, his eyes ablaze with fervor. He was alive at last in his life. He was no longer the unwanted, invisible wife. He was about to be the most powerful man his family, and Victor, ever knew. There was a strange air of celebration at the Black House. Lila, recovering from her stay at the hospital, reclined on the couch as Victor refilled her glass with wine. Daniel and Lucas clinked bottles of soda together, their own laughter filling the room. Victor lifted his glass. To new beginnings, he declared suavely, his eyes sparkling with victory. The Izards Group will be firmly on your side, Lila, once they invest in your company. Your business will soar to new heights. And with me by your side, he let his words fade away, the smile on his face more eloquent than any statement. Lila's cheeks flushed, her lips curving into a smile so soft it seemed to be the first in years. For the first time, she felt the burden of her marriage starting to shift. Freedom in view. Her phone had been buzzing on the table just then, and the screen lit up with Ethan's name. She paused, then answered icily. What do you want? Ethan's voice came steady, calm, but heavy with finality. Lila. I've thought about it. You've been asking for a divorce for a long time. I'll grant your wish. Tomorrow, we'll make it official. For a moment, silence hung in the room. Then Lila's eyes filled with tears, not of sorrow, but of relief. You mean it? You'll finally let me go? Yes, Ethan responded bluntly. You'll be free. And the line fell silent. Lila stared at the phone for a long time before she dissolved into laughter. Her sons cheered. Finally. Daniel yelled. Mom, you don't have to suffer with him anymore. Lucas hugged Victor close. Uncle Victor, no, Dad, you'll take care of us now, won't you? Victor's chest swelled with pride. He ruffled the boy's hair. Of course. From now on you'll have the father you've always deserved. They caroused late into the night, wine, music, laughter. Neighbors grumbled about the boisterous noise coming from the Black House, none of them knowing that they were partying a betrayal. Lila leaned against Victor's shoulder, speaking softly, firmly, finally. I will be free of him. Finally, I will have the life that is mine. Victor wrapped his arm around her, a satisfied smile etching his mouth. The following morning, impeccably dressed, Lila entered the Civil Affairs Bureau with Victor at her side and her sons trailing behind her. Ethan was already there, seated in silence. Her heart pounded excitedly, liberty depended on the signing of a document. She did not know that by evening, the same individual she thought she was turning down would be at the pinnacle of the empire that Victor and she were struggling tooth and nail to ascend to. The Civil Affairs Bureau was a room full of beginnings and endings. Couples entered hand in hand and exited as strangers. For Ethan, it was like going to a funeral, not for the death of life, but for love that was never given a chance to live. He was already at the long table, sitting up straight, his face carved in stone. Across from him, Lila walked in with Victor accompanying her, her sons trailing behind her like small shadows. She looked radiant, too radiant for a woman who was going to rip her years-old marriage apart. "Ethan," she said coolly, her voice detached, professional. As though they'd never shared a home, a bed, or children. He inclined his head, lips tight. "Lila." The clerk slid the divorce papers across the table. The air was heavy, suffocating. Each word on the page cut deeper than any knife. Lila scanned the document quickly, her expression brightening the further she read. There were no disputes, no claims, no fights. Ethan hadn't demanded anything, no alimony, no custody battle, no property. Nothing. She lifted her eyes in disbelief. "You're not contesting anything." Ethan's eyes were cold, unreadable. "You wanted freedom. I'm granting it." Her hand trembled hardly at all when she reached for the pen. With a swift motion, she signed her name, then shoved the papers towards him. Ethan took the pen. His hand hovered over the line for a second. Memories flooded him, their wedding day, the nights he'd stayed awake listening to her breathe, the times he'd wanted her to smile at him with more than tolerance. But all that was gone. Dust. He signed his name with a steady hand. No hesitation, no flair. Just finality. The clerk stamped the papers with a loud thud. "It's done," he said simply. Lila exhaled in relief, as if a great weight had been lifted. She turned to Victor, her lips curving in a smile so gentle Ethan had never seen it turned on him. Daniel and Lucas grinned from ear to ear. "Mom's free," one whispered. Victor slipped a possessive arm around Lila's waist. Ethan rose to his feet slowly, his face impassive. Internally, though, he was gutted, an empty cavity echoing with disappointment. He had represented nothing to them but a prison. Not a husband. Not a father. Just a mistake. But he was done. Done bleeding for individuals who'd never gazed upon him. Done waiting for love that had never been. He spun and walked away from the Civil Affairs Bureau in silence, the cold morning air biting his face. Laughter erupted behind him as Lila and Victor celebrated. Ethan didn't look back. He wouldn't give them the joy of seeing him hurt. He spoke under his breath, like a promise, "This is the last time I bleed for people who never saw me. I'm done being stepped on." And with that, he walked away, a divorced man, yes, but also a man on the cusp of revealing the identity that would shake their world to its core. Ethan walked dazedly after leaving the Civil Affairs Bureau. The city bustled as if in mockery of him, strangers laughed, couples held hands, businessmen rushed past him with briefcases and purpose. To them, he was just another face on the street. No one knew he had lost everything just then. He wound up at the riverfront, where he used to take Daniel and Lucas when they were kids. He remembered their laughter, their little hands grasping his as they begged for ice cream. He had given them everything he had, his time, his patience, his sleepless nights, and all they could see was a failure. Ethan sat on a worn bench, elbows on his knees, staring at the rippling water. His reflection looked back at him, tired eyes, hollow cheeks, a man who had been mocked and spat on for too long. "Lila's free," he muttered under his breath. "The kids have chosen their hero. And he exhaled shakily. "I'm just a ghost to them." For a moment, despair appeared to suffocate him. What was left of him, now that the family he had built had deleted him like a mistake? But then, a chilly lucidity washed over him. He recalled his late adoptive father, the man who had picked him from nothing and raised him to be more than the world believed. He recalled the lawyer's words, "Are you ready to take on such a tremendous burden?" Ethan squared his shoulders. His image in the river no longer seemed broken. It seemed sharp. Resolute. No more begging. No more proving myself to people who never cared. His voice was harder now, low and menacing. "The Ethan who bowed and scraped for love is dead." The wind gusted harder, blowing dry leaves around him. It was as if the world itself was recognizing the funeral of his old self. He rose from the bench, shoulders straight, step steady. He had lost everything that had ever tied him down, but in the losing was freedom. Freedom to stand, to reclaim what was his by right. When he returned to the street, his phone buzzed. A message from the lawyer: "The Izards are waiting. It's time." Ethan's lips curled into the faintest of smiles. Time to take what's mine. With that, he hailed a taxi, leaving the ashes of a cowardly husband and father behind. Ahead of him was the empire he had been born and steeled to inherit. The black entourage cruised up in front of the giant glass skyscraper of the Izards Group. The building itself was a testament to power, sleek and impenetrable, the kind of place where fortunes were made and lost over a handshake. But the real spectacle wasn't the building. It was the men getting out of the armored SUV. Ethan. Where there had once been the weary husband in creased shirts, the useless man mocked by his own offspring. In his place was a man who commanded silence. A charcoal gray suit hugged his muscular build, his tie properly knotted. Darkening shadows shrouded his eyes, but not the deathly presence that surrounded him. Two black-jacketed bodyguards flanked him simultaneously, their movements sharp, their loyalty unshakable. A third opened the skyscraper glass doors with the grand gesture of opening the doors to a throne room. The lobby froze. Employees who had never seen him before murmured in awe. "Who's that? Look at the security detail, must be somebody. The aura, he is not human. He is power embodied." Ethan strode across the marble foyer, his leather boots clacking with purposeful authority. Each step seemed to clang out more insistently than ever before, as though the building itself knew its rightful owner had come back. When the elevator doors swung open, the lawyer was standing at the top level. In contrast to before, his expression held no hesitation, no queries, only knowing respect. "Sir," the lawyer bowed slightly, "the board is ready. The Izards empire is yours to claim." Ethan removed his shades, revealing eyes no longer soft, no longer pleading, but sharp, commanding, untouchable. "Let's not waste time," he said coolly. "I've been invisible long enough. From this day forward, everyone will see exactly who Ethan Gray truly is." The lawyer smiled faintly, pride flashing in his eyes as the boardroom doors opened. Dozens of power players, men and women who controlled governments and industries, turned their heads. They were expecting the faceless heir. What they got instead was a king. Ethan moved in, his security detail falling into line behind him. His presence quieted the murmurs at once. He wasn't just in the room. He filled it. The rebirth was complete. The vast Izards Group boardroom glowed with waxed wood and gleaming glass walls that hung over the city. A long table dominated the room, occupied by the most powerful shareholders and CEOs in the country. Men and women who had once sat beside Ethan's foster father, and who had waited, some with anticipation, some with ambition, for the heir to finally appear. As Ethan entered, flanked by his guards, silence fell. It wasn't respect, it was awe. The air around him was stifling. The men they had tolerated as a non-person, a presence, stood before them now as a giant. The lawyer cleared his throat and spoke to fill the silence. "Ladies and gentlemen, as you are no doubt aware, the late chairman bequeathed every share, every asset, every grain of this empire to one person. Today, I am pleased to introduce to you Ethan Gray, the sole heir of the Izards legacy." There were gasps at the table. Some clapped immediately, others looked at one another with suspicion, but some grayer faces bristled with bitterness. Ethan moved forward, his expression serene, inscrutable, as if he had rehearsed this moment in quietude his entire life. "I stand here today," he declared, his voice firm but with energy raging through it, "not as the man you once disapproved of, not as the husband laughed at or the father reviled. I stand here as the rightful owner of the Izards Group. And from today onward, this empire will take greater heights than ever before." Thunderous applause filled the air. Even some of the executives rose, applauding in awe at the commanding presence of Ethan. To them, the return of the heir was security, prosperity, and protection. But not everyone was celebrating. In the last of the seats, a gray-haired man leaned back, face scrunched in a tight, irritated line. His was Mr. Rowan, an old and veteran board member who had only ever desired the throne. Beside him, a fellow ally, Madame Kessler, hissed, "The boy thinks he can just walk in here and take command. Let's see how long he lasts." However, their complaints went unheard in the waves of applause, and their bitterness hid behind polite faces. The lawyer placed the formal documents before Ethan. "Please, sir." Ethan took the pen, his own hand steady. With one bold stroke, he signed his name across the inheritance documents. As he sealed his signature into place, the entire boardroom erupted once more. Cameras snapped, executives rushed to greet him with handshakes, and workers outside the glass doors whispered in awe. Ethan sat in the head chair, the same one his adoptive father had used to sit in. He looked around the room. "From now on," he declared, "the Izard's name will be remembered, respected, and feared. And I won't tolerate betrayal in these halls. You'll stand with me. Or die before me." His words silenced even Rowan and Kessler, though their eyes still burned with schemes. But to everyone else present in the room, there was no doubt. While the Izard's boardroom thundered with applause, another kind of celebration was happening across town. Victor had gathered Lila and the boys at her mother's house, filling the living room with expensive champagne, catered food, and smug laughter. Victor leaned back in the couch, one arm sprawled along the back of it as if he were already a part of the family. Daniel and Lucas flanked him, waiting with bated breath for his next utterance. Lila, wan from bed rest in the hospital, appeared more glowing than she'd been in weeks, her smile wide, her eyes soft with thankfulness when she gazed at Victor. "You can stop worrying now," Victor said confidently, swirling his drink. "I'll set up a meeting with the Izards tomorrow. I've been networking for months. They'll invest in your business, Lila. You'll get farther than you ever dreamed, /." Daniel grinned. "See, Mom. Uncle Victor makes things happen." Lucas spoke up eagerly, "Yeah. With him on our side, who needs that guy?" The room was filled with laughter, bitter and mocking. The air reeked of disdain for the men they had erased from their lives. Then, however, Lila's mom, who had been scrolling quietly on her tablet, abruptly sat up, eyes wide. "Lila. Victor, have you seen the news?" Victor's eyebrow shot up. "What news?" She turned the tablet around. On the screen was a live broadcast, the Izard's group boardroom, complete with cameras and flashing lights. And in the center of it all, Ethan. Towering, tall, regal in his suit, signing the documents that made him sole heir of the Izard's fortune. The headline beneath the broadcast read, "Breaking, Ethan Gray installed as sole heir of the Izard's group." For a few seconds, there was silence in the room. Lila blinked a few times, her head shaking. That can't be Ethan. That's some kind of mistake. He's useless. He's nothing." Victor snorted loudly, even though his jaw had tightened. "Impossible. This is just media hype. Ethan. The same guy who couldn't even keep a job. Heir to the Izards? Don't make me laugh." Her mother frowned. "But the footage is live. It's him. Look." Everyone's eyes were back on the screen, the image undeniable, Ethan, the man they had mocked, a king for all the world to behold. Victor snorted, giving an awkward laugh to mask his unease. "I don't care what the cameras are saying. That man could never amount to anything. Trust me, it's smoke and mirrors. He's still the same pathetic worm." Lila nodded quickly, clinging to Victor's reassurance. Yes, you're right. It must be some kind of confusion. Ethan. A big boss. That's impossible." The children giggled nervously, echoing the dismissal. And so, surrounded by laughter and denial, they brushed off the breaking news, blind to the storm that was already gathering over their heads. The next morning, Lila wore her finest suit and walked into her firm. She had rehearsed the words she would use when Victor secured the Izard's partnership, the confidence she would exude, the respect she would receive in kind from her employees. But from the moment she stepped into the lobby, something was wrong. The receptionist gave her a brief, nearly sympathetic look before dropping her eyes. Two of the younger personnel, furious, whispered to each other, their eyes darting toward her then quickly away. Even the guards stiffly nodded to her, refusing to meet her eyes. By the time she'd cleared the open office floor, the stares were agony. Every whisper sounded like it carried her name. Every look felt like a knife. "What on earth is happening here?" she snapped, her heels clicking in outrage against the polished tiles. Why are you all staring like that? Back to work, all of you. The employees scattered but not the whispers. Perplexed and becoming angrier by the minute, Lila stormed into her office and slammed the door behind her. Her assistant, Michael, was already inside, clutching a stack of reports. He did not even attempt to conceal the smile tugging at his lips. Michael, Lila barked, what's going on out there? Why is everyone looking at me like that? Michael set the reports down slowly, meeting her eyes with a boldness he never had before. You really don't know. Lila's brows narrowed. Know what? Michael leaned back against the desk, his arms folded. That your ex-husband, the man you and your whole family mocked as worthless, is the new head of the Azards group. The same folks you've been begging for cooperation. Lila didn't move, her mouth opening but making no noise. Michael's tone sharpened. The whole city is talking about it. Every business circle, every news feed, every social media feed. You're trending, Lila. Not because of your company, but because you were foolish enough to abuse and discard the man who now occupies the throne everyone else bows to. He picked up his phone and turned the screen towards her. There it was again, the same video her mother had shown her. Ethan, looking regal in his suit, signing the inheritance papers, headlines screaming his name. His face, calm and commanding, was plastered on every news headline. The phone slipped from Michael's grasp onto her desk, but Lila didn't move to pick it up. She fell back into her chair, her knees weakening. Her chest tightened. The room spun. She clutched the edge of the desk as if it was the only thing keeping her from completely falling apart. It's true, she whispered hoarsely. It wasn't a mistake. Her lady-in-waiting laughed, a cold, humorless sound. You wanted power? You had it, all along, right there in your own household. But you were too blind to see. Now the entire world knows you for what you are, the woman who lost the king she already had. Lila collapsed fully into her chair, her carefully constructed world collapsing around her. For the first time, she realized she hadn't lost Ethan yesterday. She'd lost him years ago. Victor stormed into Lila's office mid-morning, his normally neat hair slightly rumpled, his jaw set in denial. Lila, please tell me you don't think this is absurd. Ethan. In control of the Azards? Impossible. Lila, pale and trembling, shoved her assistant's phone at him. It's all over, Victor. The video. The boardroom. The signing. It's all on the way. Victor's bluster faltered for a moment. His mouth hung open, snapped shut, and then he shook his head in rage. No. No, it's a stunt. He must be posing as someone else. The media's been duped. I'll prove it. Hours later, Victor and Lila marched into the grand lobby of the Azards headquarters. Their entrance turned heads immediately, not in admiration, but in recognition. Employees whispered among themselves, some smirking openly. Aren't those the people who mocked him? The ex-wife and her hero brother-in-law. They've got guts showing up here. They trailed behind into the whispers at the reception desk. Victor slammed his fist on the desk. I want to see your so-called heir, Ethan Gray. He is a pretender. He has no right sitting in that seat. The receptionist's polite smile never faltered, but her voice was firm. I'm afraid not, sir. Chairman Gray is attending a board meeting. And he's no imposter. He is the sole heir to this company. Lila's face burned with shame. Do you even know who I am? I'm his wife, she hesitated, her voice cracking up. I was his wife. He's deceiving all of you. He's an imposter. The security guards had already advanced, their figures threatening and piercing. One of them spoke coldly. Ma'am, sir, you need to cool down or you can leave. This is not a place for drama. Victor puffed out his chest, his voice filled with superiority. Do you know who I am? I'm Victor Hale. And I am telling you, Ethan Gray is a nobody who. Before he could finish, the glass doors of the executive wing swung open. Some board members stepped outside, including Mr. Rowan, Madam Kessler, and the lawyer himself. They stopped when they saw Victor and Lila. There was a hush that moved through the lobby. The lawyer's voice cut. How dare you create a commotion in this building? You stand here maligning the very person who now holds every stock, every title, every helm of the Azard's empire. Ethan Gray is the chairman. The only chairman. There were murmurs of agreement running through the witnesses. Someone spat at Ethan, think to call the king an impostor. Pitiful. Lila's face reddened. Victor spluttered, but his words were stuck in his throat. Get them out, the lawyer barked. The guards didn't hesitate. Victor flailed, but his arm was pushed back with professional force. Lila was pushed along beside him, her heels screeching on the highly polished floor. The group of staff did not attempt to hide their giggles. Phones appeared, filming every second. Look at them, being taken away like common felons. That's the woman who spit in her own husband's face. And now he's her boss. Oh, irony. Victor and Lila were thrust through the revolving doors and onto the pavement. The glass walls of the Azard's tower loomed above them like the gates of a fortress through which they would never pass again. Humiliated, powerless, their denials shattered, they stood blinking in the sunlight as the cameras rolled on. For everybody to see. They had thrown away a king. Behind the glass wall on the uppermost floor of Azard's glittering headquarters, Ethan stood with his hands in his pockets, looking down at the chaos beneath him. Security was dragging Lila and Victor out of the lobby, their faces screeching, begging, and demeaning. It was just wind-borne sound to his ears. His face did not flinch, unfeeling, detached, untouchable. That evening, Lila's phone rang frantically. The voice of her mother, trembling with urgency, cracked through the receiver. Come home now. Right away. When she arrived, the air was thick with shame. Her mother, Victor's longtime praiser, was pale and frantic. She clutched Lila's hand, her voice slashing but pleading. You have to plead with Ethan to return to you. Can't you see? He still loves you. He always did. He'll forgive you if only you go down on your knees. You can't lose this chance again. Lila had no time to respond before her youngest son burst into the room. His words, bitter and painful, stabbed her heart. I don't want that broke dad no more. But the moment he discovered the truth, that Ethan wasn't just back on his feet, but now the richest man in the city, his face transformed in a heartbeat, eyes bulging with greed. Mom. You have to beg Dad to forgive us. We can't live like this while he's out there with all of it. He'll take us back. I know he will. The hypocrisy stung more than the humiliation. Even her kids, even her own flesh and blood, were willing to trade pride for luxury. And for the first time, Lila realized just how low she'd fallen, while Ethan, the men she threw away, had risen so high that none of them could even touch him. The next morning, Lila dressed with trembling hands, in her most expensive outfit, as if fine silk and polished heels would reverse years of lies. She rehearsed what to say in her head on the car ride to Azard's headquarters, convincing herself that Ethan would soften up once he saw her. When she arrived, the staff welcomed her with uneasy glances. Security did not even attempt to prevent her, everyone recognized who she was, but no one offered her the friendly smiles she was used to. She stepped onto the executive level. The broad glass doors of Ethan's office loomed in front of her, watched over by two dour men in black suits. For an instant, her confidence faltered. But then the door slid open, and there he was. Ethan. Crisp suit, impenetrable expression, a presence that took over the space in front of him before he'd even uttered a word. He glanced at her briefly, then turned his attention back to the stack of papers his aide was handing him. Ethan, she whispered, taking a step forward. I was wrong. Please. I need to talk to you. About us. About our family. Her voice cracked. She waited for him to turn to her, to see her, to give her something. Anything. But he didn't. Ethan walked by her silently, without pausing, as if she were not dissimilar from the plant in the corner. His security detail followed in step behind him, making it obvious that she could not follow. Ethan, she keened, despair rasping her throat. Please. I'm sorry. Can't you see I regret everything? Her cry echoed in the vast marble hallway, but he never looked back. To Ethan, Lila no longer existed. And that, more than any insult, broke her completely. The moment Ethan brushed against her, something inside Lila shattered. Her knees weakened, but pride continued to hold her upright until the heavy doors shut on him. Then started the whispers. Colleagues passing by looked aside, their sidelong glances piercing like daggers. That's the woman who left him, she lost a king. Some actually snarled. She had never felt so exposed, so humiliated. Her uneven heels clicked on the new floor as she tottered back to the elevator. When she got into the car, tears had clouded her vision. She shut the door and slumped down, ugly crying erupting from within her chest. After all that I gave him, she snarled through gritted teeth, mascara streaking down her face. But already she knew she was not telling the truth. What had she given him? Insults, rejection, betrayal. Anger seethed under the embarrassment. Victor. It's all Victor's fault. He filled my head, convinced me Ethan was worthless. But a voice inside spat, no. You chose. You laughed as he begged you. You pushed him away. When she came home, she was a tempest. She yelled at Victor, accused him of lying to her, of ruining her life. Victor fired back that she was blind and thankless. Their words tangled into confusion, but neither of them was stout enough to speak the truth, that they had both built their lives on mocking Ethan, and now they were choking on the ashes. She remained awake that night. She stared at the ceiling, replaying the scene over and over again, Ethan walking past her, eyes cold, face impassive. She could live through insults, even with hatred, but that silence, it was worse than death. By dawn, she looked in the mirror and barely recognized the hollow-eyed woman staring back. Desperation clutched her heart. I'll make him listen. He has to. He loved me once, he must still love me somewhere. But beneath that flicker of hope was a gnawing terror, what if he never forgives me? What if I've lost him forever? Lila was never the begging type. She was proud, sharp-tongued, the woman who once made entire boardrooms tremble with a single glare. But that pride crumbled faster than sand slipping through fingers. The second time Ethan appeared at a public event, flanked by executives, cameras flashing like lightning, Lila muscled her way through the crowd, her once flawless demeanor given over to desperation. Ethan, she cried, grabbing his arm before the guards could push her away. Her voice broke, echoing in the hall. Please, please, listen to me. I was wrong. Gasps circled the room. Phones were held up, capturing every detail. Ethan never so much as looked at her. Flicking his wrist in a smooth motion, he gave a signal to the guards. They took her away like a stranger. Her heels clicked on the marble, her sobbing echoing off the walls. Cameras devoured it. The next morning headlines blared, ex-wife of Azard's new heir begs for forgiveness, gets ignored. Her children were her second instrument. She caught them one evening, weeping hopelessly, holding hands. Go and tell your daddy you miss him. Tell him you need him home again. He'll listen to you. He always adored you. But the boys, those already intoxicated by the excess Victor treated them to, hesitated. The oldest pulled his hand back. Why should we? You said he was nothing. Now he's a big shot, and you're only coming back because of it. You're the one who lied, not him. The words cut deeper than knives. She collapsed against the floor, clutching at her chest, as her own sons became echoes of the contempt she once directed toward Ethan. And Victor? He was chilly, restless. You've embarrassed yourself long enough, he sneered one night, sipping his whiskey as she howled. You're pathetic, Lila. Do you believe groveling will change anything? He doesn't want you. He never will. The slap she gave to his face rang out across the room, but even that wasn't real. Victor just laughed, hard and cruel. Piece by piece, her kingdom of pride fell. Board members did not respect her anymore. Her children no longer trusted her. Victor no longer defended her. And Ethan would not even give her the respect of hatred. He treated her as though she did not exist. She existed but was invisible. Lila's shame spread far and wide. Every attempt to regain a place in Ethan's life only added to her shame. At a high society function, she walked in with her head held high, prepared to confront Ethan publicly in front of the city's elite. But the whispers started before she had even reached her table. That's her. The one who begged on the street. She really thought she could cast him aside and just slink back. pathetic. When she approached Ethan, hands trembling as she extended hers, security intervened before she could utter a word. The crowd openly guffawed this time. Tabloids received their cover shot, the fallen queen, Lila cast out again. Friends began avoiding her calls. Board members discussed her instability behind her back. Even her own staff giggled behind her back. Her authoritative presence had become a walking scandal. The final blow came at home. Her eldest son, Marcus, had been quiet for weeks, observing, reflecting, piecing the truth together. He confronted her one night. "Mom," he said, his voice hard in a way that made her nervous. "Why did you make us hate Dad?" Lila tensed. "What are you talking about? You and Uncle Victor, you brainwashed us. You made us believe he was useless, that he didn't care. But I see now. He was the only one who ever really tried for us. I'm ashamed I cursed him." His eyes gleamed, but there was no gentleness in them for her. "You ripped our family apart, not him." Lila's lips trembled, but no words came. She had no defense. Not anymore. Later that night, Marcus snuck out. He found Ethan at the Izard's headquarters, the boy nervous but determined as he faced the enormous guards at the entrance. Ethan, when he saw him, did not expect anger or rebellion, just a trembling son with tears in his eyes. "Dad," Marcus whispered, breaking down. "I'm sorry. I was wrong. Uncle Victor lied to us. Mom lied to us. You didn't deserve what we said, what I said. Forgive me, please." Ethan was quiet for a moment. He watched his son's face, the guilt, the sincerity, the innocence that had been distorted by manipulation. Then, slowly, Ethan laid a hand on his shoulder. "Marcus, you're my son. There's nothing to forgive." Marcus cried harder, his face pressed against his father's chest. Ethan embraced him firmly, a rare softness in his eyes. He had been spurned by all those he loved, mocked by the world, but in this instant, he knew his son wasn't truly lost. Lila did not know Marcus had come to see him. It was their secret for now. Victor had been unraveling for weeks. Ethan's sudden rise had deprived him of power, influence, and dignity. His carefully crafted image as the better man had disintegrated in front of the whole city. And to make matters worse, Marcus' defection to his father gnawed at his pride like acid. Just when despair was getting its claws into him, though, there was a knock on his office door. It was a man in his 60s, dressed in an immaculate suit, eyes sharp with calculation. One of the Izard's old guard, the very faction that had never accepted Ethan's takeover. "You hate Ethan Grayson," the man said without preamble, voice smooth as poison. "We do too. And we're planning to remove him. For good." Victor's blood surged. At last, an opening. He leaned forward, hungry. "Remove him, how?" The elderly man smiled thinly. "Accidents do happen. Power changes hands. Play your role well, and the Izards will not forget you. Possibly even reward you." Victor did not pause. "Tell me what you want." That night, he stormed into Lila's house with fire in his eyes. She was curled on the couch, broken by days of public humiliation. But as Victor laid out the plan, how Ethan was on the verge of being caught, how the Izard's board was already fracturing, how soon her ex-husband would fall, the haughtiness crept back into her face like a ghost returning to life. "So," she said, crossing her arms with a self-satisfied grin, "the mighty Ethan is finally going to experience the taste of defeat. And here I was believing he was invincible." Victor sneered, soaking up her attention again. "See? I said so. He's not invincible. I'll annihilate him once and for all. Then you'll see who's truly worthy of standing beside you." For the first time in weeks, Lila laughed. A harsh, arrogant laugh. Yes. That useless man had his little moment in the sun. But soon, he'll be back where he belongs, beneath us. The air between them didn't simply simmer with malice, it seethed. Neither of them gave a damn about loyalty, family, or truth anymore. They only cared about seeing Ethan being brought down. What they hadn't realized was that Ethan already had eyes and ears everywhere. And their plan wouldn't be secret for long. Ethan had just come from a meeting with foreign investors, his stride loose and commanding as he walked to his car accompanied by security. The city buzzed with his name on every billboard and headline, though for him it was just another day of building the empire he was born to rule. "Dad." The terrified voice cut the air. Ethan whirled around, startled. It was Marcus, out of breath, his eyes wide with terror, his shirt half unbuttoned as though he had run there. "Marcus. What's wrong?" Ethan's calm facade cracked for the first time. Marcus stumbled closer, clinging to his father's arm. "It's Mom, Lila. She's in the hospital. Her kidney failure, it got worse. They said this time it could be life-threatening." His voice broke, trembling. "Please, Dad, you have to save her. You're the only one who can." Ethan's chest tightened. As much as Lila had hurt him, she was still the mother of his children. He opened his mouth to respond. But Marcus's eyes widened in horror within a split second. "Dad, look out." Time crawled. From the rooftop edge across the street, metal glinted in the light. A gun muzzle. In the moment before Ethan could react, Marcus sprang forward with a yell, knocking his father down as the gunshot sounded like thunder. The bullet tore through Marcus's left hand, blood spurting as he dropped with a scream. "Marcus!" Ethan roared, horror and anger colliding in his chest as he grabbed up his son. His guards jumped into action, some of them shielding him, others firing back at the invisible sniper. Chaos erupted, civilians fled, sirens wailing in the distance. Ethan held his son's trembling form, blood spreading into his designer suit. "Stay with me, Marcus. You're going to be okay, do you hear me?" Marcus gritted his teeth, tears streaming. "Dad, it's not your fault. I couldn't let them take you away." Ethan's jaw hardened, fury burning beneath his controlled exterior. He had endured betrayal, humiliation, and loss. But seeing his son bleed for him, because of him, was the final straw. The person who had devised this had just declared war. And Ethan Grayson did not forgive war. Ethan's world disintegrated into flashes of blinding light and hysterical screams as he assisted Marcus into the back of his combat vehicle. His son's blood soaked his hands, the heat of it wet, every beat a reminder of how close death had come. "Drive us to St. Clair's, now." Ethan bellowed to the driver, his voice thunder. "Yes, sir." As the car lurched forward, Ethan removed his jacket, folding it around Marcus's hurt hand to cut off the bleeding. His usually firm fingers shook, but his black, cold eyes were already burning with vengeance. He sat up and turned to confront his chief of security, who had placed a comm unit to his ear. "Lock down all the streets surrounding the Azard's tower," Ethan ordered, his tone as icy as metal. "I want every camera, every witness, every possible angle pulled. Whoever dared put a hand on my son. I want them dragged out of the shadows before daybreak." The men nodded once. "Will do, sir. We'll catch them." Marcus complained, his face wan. Ethan leaned close, his tone growing gentler only for him. "You'll be fine, son. Stay awake for me. Don't close your eyes." Marcus tried to smile, but it twisted into a grimace of pain. "Dad, don't let them win." "I won't," Ethan swore, his voice low and deadly. "No one touches my family and walks away." The car skidded to a halt in front of the emergency wing. Nurses and doctors flooded out with a gurney, lifting Marcus out of Ethan's arms. For a moment, he stood frozen in the doorway, blood on his chest from his son's, his heart pounding with anger. The head of security trailed behind him, expression grim. "Sir, the shooter got away, but we followed his path. This was not random. It was deliberate. Someone in this building gave him your schedule." Ethan's jaw tightened. He already knew what that meant. Victor. And whoever was behind him. "Find them," Ethan told him, his tone icy enough to cut glass. "I don't care what you have to do. Find all of them. And when you find them, don't give me alibis. Give me names." The night was no longer just about staying alive. It was about revenge. The sterile white corridors of St. Clair's shuddered with tension. Marcus was already in surgery, surgeons working desperately to save his hand. Shortly afterwards, another gurney came rolling in, Lila, her body gaunt, face clammy from the worsening kidney failure. Ethan leaned against the glass window, fists jammed into his pockets, mind battling between rage and duty. His chest ached from gazing at her. After all of this, do I make her miserable? Do I let her die? He remembered the tears she shed, though not for him. The curses she hurled, the ignominy she brought upon his name. A part of him growled to turn around. And then he thought of Marcus. His son, still battling for him after having been manipulated all these years. And the younger one, not guilty, even after the poison fed into his mind. Ethan's decision was final. He inhaled deeply, summoning the chief physician. Give her the best treatment possible. Whatever she needs, equipment, specialists, donors, she gets them. His tone was firm, his expression stone-faced. Do it for my children. Not for her. The doctor nodded, sprinting back into the ward. It didn't take long that chaos flooded the hospital entrance. Victor, followed by the youngest boy, burst in, his voice ringing down the corridor. Where's he? Where is that son of a bitch? Ethan slowly rotated, his gaze as chilly as ice. Victor sneered. All your fault. Marcus is hurt in there because of you. If you weren't parading around here like some fake king, this never would have happened. The baby boy, his eyes brimming with tears, blindly repeated, It's true. You're a curse, Dad. Marcus was hurt because of you. The words lanced through Ethan's heart like knives. He'd known it would happen, but to hear it burned him. Nurses stormed into the silence to mute the disturbance, but Victor simply continued screaming, shaking a finger in Ethan's direction. You'll never be worthy to protect them. You were born worthless, and with wealth, you're still worthless. Look at Marcus, bleeding for a man who wasn't even fit to be called a father. Ethan's warriors advanced, prepared to throw Victor out. But Ethan raised a hand, holding them back. He approached slowly, his calm terrifying in its magnitude. His gaze burned into Victor's. Say what you will of me. But don't you ever forget, you're the one who made Marcus bleed today. Victor paused for a fraction of a second, his mask of arrogance cracking. And Ethan knew then, his warriors would shortly have proof. For now, he turned away from him, going towards the ICU where both Marcus and Lila struggled to live. His low but piercing voice echoed through the room. I don't forgive betrayal, Victor. And when the truth comes out, you won't know where to hide. The hospital air was already suffocating with tension prior to another of those high-pitched voices cutting through the halls. Where is he? Where is that worthless piece of a man? Lila's mother swirled in, dominant presence intact as always, dragging two relatives in her wake. Her eyes landed on Ethan and rage erupted at once. There you are, she spat, walking up to him. My daughter is dying in there because of you. You gave her nothing but misery, first poverty, now sickness. And Marcus. Look what happened to him. You're cursed, Ethan. Cursed through and through. Her words echoed so loudly that patients looked out from their rooms, nurses froze in their tracks, and the entire waiting area was abuzz with whispers. Victor smirked over in the corner, arms crossed and all, viewing the spectacle. The youngest son hid behind his grandmother, bobbing his head up and down with every insult she spat. Do you know what you've done to this family? Lila's mother fumed, her finger jabbing inches from Ethan's chest. If my daughter dies, if Marcus loses his hand, I will make the world understand you destroyed them. Not Victor, not anyone else, you. The other family members chimed in, heavy with disdain. She should have divorced him years ago. She should have a man of her own to accompany her, not an encumbrance. Victor has been a better husband than he ever was. Ethan spoke not a word, his face an unreadable mask, but his fists tight behind his back until his knuckles went white. Victor, in a triumphant mood, stepped up and laid a calming hand on Lila's mother's shoulder. Don't waste your time talking to him. Some men are not worth it. I promise you, I'll take care of Lila. I'll take care of both boys. Trust me. The smug condescension of his tone infuriated Ethan's blood, but he obstinately refused to let them rile him. Instead, he looked over in the direction of the ICU, where Lila and Marcus waged their wars. His son's sacrifice echoed in his mind. Hold on, Marcus. Just a little longer. The truth is going to burn them all to ash. For the time being, he let the storm rage. But when his soldiers returned with proof of who had fired the bullet, when betrayal web was revealed, this hospital, which now taunted him, would witness a very different Ethan. One who was not just a husband, or a father, but the master of Azards, the owner of their world. The commotion was still going strong, Victor boasting, Lila's mother yelling, the youngest boy glaring at Ethan with hostility, when the automatic doors opened. 2 of Ethan's men entered, faces stern, escorted by hospital security they had bullied aside. The atmosphere immediately changed, they insisted on silence. One of them, a broad-shouldered, hulking man with a scar down his cheek, walked straight up to Ethan and handed him a fat brown envelope. "Boss," he said loudly, his voice echoing through the hallway, "we've got them. We tailed the shooter." He sang. Ethan's jaw hardened. He didn't even unfold the file yet. Rather, he spun specifically, slow, purposeful, towards Victor. Victor's cocky grin wavered. "Do it," Ethan ordered, his voice cold and low, with killing calm. "Inform them who bought the bullet meant for me." The scarred man pulled out the pictures from the envelope and tossed them onto the reception room table for all to see. Blurry surveillance pictures, bank checks, and finally, the telltale picture of Victor shaking hands with the killer. Gasp cut through the kin. Lila's mother recoiled, face pale. Victor," she whispered, incredulity fracturing her voice. Victor tried to bluff, this is a setup. He made this all up. But the second of Ethan's men cut him off, holding out a phone with a recorded confession. The shaking voice of the shooter echoed down the hall. "Victor vowed to give me half initially, half when Ethan was dead. Told the family would at last be his. Told he'd be the one to inherit it all." The room fell into stunned silence. The youngest boy, who had been grasping Victor's leg mere seconds before, retreated as if burned. Lila's mother looked as if the world had been yanked out from beneath her. And Ethan, icy as a predator, finally advanced, never losing his sight of Victor. "You manipulated my son. You tried to break what's mine. And you had the nerve to shoot at me." His voice dropped, cold and unyielding. "You just sealed your own death warrant." Cornered and pale, Victor at last lost control, lashing out at Ethan in a desperate act of defiance, but security and Ethan's men overpowered him in 2 seconds, his flailing pinned underneath their bodies. The waiting room erupted into murmurs, some excusing Ethan, others stunned by Victor's betrayal. And as Victor was dragged away, cursing and kicking, Ethan finally stood before Lila's mother, his words slicing through her guilt. "You accused me. You spat on me. But the man you defended was ready to kill you, and came close to taking your grandson's life. Do not forget that the next time you yell at me." The entire hospital stood stunned in silence as Ethan walked away, all eyes on him. For the first time in years, no one could deny it, Ethan Gray was not the weak link in this family. He was the power they had underestimated. Victor's arrest hit the headlines. The tabloids published the story for days, the Golden Boy's fall from grace, betrayal, blood, and broken trust. Finally, the shame wasn't on Ethan. It was on Victor. Flanked into court in handcuffs, his face drooping low under the blinding flashes of cameras, Victor was left with nothing. Nobody ever had the heart to feel sorry for him. He had tried to kill Ethan Gray, the man now hushed in reverence as inviolable. The punishment was not death. No, Ethan left him alive to rot in prison, a living monument of defeat. The consequences did not end there, however. Among the Azards, the older men who had plotted Victor's demise now clammed up, cowed by Ethan's return from the dead. They tried to cover their traces for weeks, pasting on polite smiles in the boardroom, avoiding his gaze, hoping he would let things go. He didn't. One by one, Ethan's investigators drew their secrets into the light. Secret accounts. Contractors who paid bribes. Stories of sabotage. Evidence was laid out on the gleaming boardroom table like weapons. The old guard broke down. Some begged. Some swore. Some even tried to negotiate behind Ethan's back, but each move was already anticipated, countered, and defeated. The final shareholders' meeting became their execution ground. Ethan, resting against the head of the long mahogany table, his presence as that of a king among cowering courtiers, spoke once. "You plotted against me. You fed your greed and thought me blind. But this empire is not for the treacherous. It is for those who stand loyal. In a single stroke, he signed the papers, banishing them from the firm they had long controlled. Guards escorted the humiliated elders away, their shouts echoing empty down the hallway. Silence remained. Then shouting. The faithful shareholders rose, one by one, promising allegiance not just to the Azards, but to Ethan Gray. By the end of the day, the company was his in all but name. Ethan had cleansed it of rot, replacing fear with discipline. And from his office on the top floor, overlooking the city once which had ridiculed him, he finally allowed himself a small smile. The world had labeled him weak. But now, they'd learn what true power resembled. The city had found a new obsession. Ethan Gray dominated headlines for weeks. Media coverage. From nobody to titan, the invincible king of Azards yelled across the papers. Business networks broadcast tapes of him kicking out the old shareholders like a king weeding out traitors. Commentators were amazed at his razor-sharp mind, his quietness turned into strategy, his determination unparalleled. Journalists who had labeled him a waste of space drifter were now battling to portray him as a visionary. Magazines put him on their covers, standing him as the men who rose out of ashes. Beaver parties and social media lapped him up. Hashtags like Invincible Ethan and King of Azards were trending for days. Influencers swooned at his sight in a suit, memes were circulating on the worthless husband who became everybody's perfect ideal, and business forums labeled his reforms as genius. Societies shift. Those who had initially ridiculed him now talked about him with respect. Business rivals who had undervalued him went to offer meetings, keen to get on his good side. Even upper-class families who had initially considered him below their status began gossiping about arranging marriages for their daughters with him. Did you hear? Ethan Gray was always the heir, he was just keeping his identity under wraps. I knew there was something about him, look at that aura. No wonder Victor fell, who could stand up against the invincible king. The world had been turned upside down, and everybody now wanted to bask in his glory. Lila's family. In Lila's household, the reversal was uglier. Her mother, who had sermonized to her about marrying Ethan, now wept hysterically. You've ruined us, Lila. You had the world in your hands, and you threw it away. Her younger son, once brainwashed into despising his father, now boasted at school that his dad was the richest man in the city. He begged his mother daily. Please, Mom, go back to him. If Dad forgives us, we'll be unstoppable. But Marcus, her eldest son, said nothing. He had witnessed the true mettle of Ethan in the hospital. He pitied his mother but was no longer her champion. Ethan was not only tough to him, he was a father figure to be admired, a man who had been belittled and emerged above everything else. And what of Lila herself? She barely ventured out. Wherever she went, there followed the whispers. Isn't that the woman who called him useless? She divorced the invincible king. Imagine being that blind. She chose Victor over Ethan. What a joke. The tabloids were merciless. One headline cut deeper than any knife. From Mrs. Gray to nobody, how Lila lost the invincible king. The day was hot. For days, Lila had been harassed by mocking whispers, invasive headlines, and sneering laughter from a society that now ostracized her as an outcast. Her former so-called hero, Victor, had vanished in disgrace. He languished in jail awaiting trial, his smug face flashed on TV screens as the snake who dared attack the invincible king. And only now did Lila realize the magnitude of her mistake. Victor had lied. He had schemed. He had poisoned her children against their own father. He had whispered poison in her ears, fueling her pride, making her blind to the only men who ever loved her for herself. As she looked at herself in the mirror, she did not see the proud businesswoman anymore. She saw a desperate, hollow woman who had lost all. Her husband. Her pride. Her respect. And worst of all, her children's trust was also failing. Marcus barely spoke to her now, and the youngest, though still clinging to her, talked only of basking in his father's glory. It devastated her. Scene, the public plea. The following week, Ethan was asked to attend a posh Azards charity ball, his first public appearance since the failed assassination attempt. The whole city held its breath for him to arrive. Lila donned her finest dress, but no gems could hide the quivering in her heart. She wasn't invited. She wasn't going. But she would. When Ethan arrived, escorted by his guards, the hall burst into applause. Cameras flashed repeatedly, journalists pushed about, and officials bowed as if royalty had moved through them. Ethan walked with fluid, mastered poise, a man who could not be defeated. And then... Ethan. Her voice cut through the room. Gasps filled the air as Lila, with heels that teetered on desperation, stumbled into the spotlight. Her eyes were smeared with tears, her body shook, yet her voice was raw emotion. "Oh, Ethan. I was mistaken," she cried, falling to her knees before him. "I was blind. I allowed lies to dominate me. I cast aside the only men who ever loved me truly. Please, I beg of you, forgive me. Take me back. For the sake of our children, for the sake of what we had." The corridor froze. Cameras panned in, capturing each second. But Ethan wouldn't move. His hard eyes were locked on her, unreadable. To him, she was not the wife he loved. She was a stranger woman kneeling at his feet, a ghost of the wife who had tormented him, mocked him, cursed him when he was vulnerable. The silence was shattered by murmurs spreading like wildfire. "That's his ex-wife. She's begging on the street. How embarrassing. She called him useless, and now look, pathetic." Even the reporters did not leave her in peace. Flashes were fired, and the next day's headlines were already being written. "The helpless wife pleads before the invincible king." Ethan finally spoke up, his voice calm but cutting. "Stand up, Lila. Do not further shame yourself." And away he went, leaving her weeping on the ground with the entire world watching. Victor had been rotting behind bars for weeks. But jail could not keep his obsession at bay. His rage against Ethan burned with growing intensity day by day. And on a rainy night, with the help of old friends and payoffs, he broke free. The city thought he was behind bars, but Victor moved like a ghost, face hidden, eyes blazing with one purpose: Ethan Gray must die. The setup. It was in a fancy downtown hotel, where Ethan would enjoy a secluded business dinner. There was tight security, his men tense, but no one expected the comeback of the specter of Victor. The hallway was black, carpets gently mopping footsteps. Ethan, out of his escort's view for an instant, moved towards the elevator with phone in hand when someone walked very close by. A flash of metal. And before Ethan could react, pain tore through him. Once. Twice. Thrice. The knife drove into his stomach, burning hot blood searing his suit. Ethan staggered, his gasp stuck in his throat, his eyesight blurring as the hooded man snarled, his words dripping with triumph. "You thought you were better than it all, Ethan. But kings bleed, too." And in a moment, Victor vanished into the shadows, gone down the stairs, leaving Ethan slumped across the floor of the hallway. The fall of the invincible king. The world slowed. The carpet under Ethan darkened with blood. He pressed his hand against his stomach, feeling the warm life flow through his fingers. For the first time in years, Ethan Gray, the invincible king, was mortal. His bodyguards stormed into the hall seconds later, terror on their faces as they collapsed next to him. "Boss. Hang on. Prepare your eyes." Ethan's lips fought to form the words, his teeth smeared with blood. His last thought was not of Victor. It was not for revenge or control. It was of Marcus, his oldest son, who had died to save him once before. And then he was lost to the darkness. The news went viral. Ethan Gray, the invincible king, stabbed in a hotel. Cameras swarmed into the hospital entrance. Business partners, politicians, and shocked citizens gathered there. Social media were filled with panic messages, trending hashtags worldwide. Save Ethan. Invincible king down. Azards in crisis. Inside, the Azards boardroom was chaos. Investors lost their minds, foes plotted to take over the throne, and friends promised vengeance. The empire trembled, all for the reason that its king rested on the brink of life and death. The surgery. Ethan was rolled into the ER, his bloody shirt a sign of warning. Surgeons were all around him, their sharp-tongued voices snapping with urgency. He's lost too much blood. 3 stab wounds, one right next to the liver. Get him prepped for surgery immediately. There was a hesitation, though. Ethan's condition was tenuous, and the risk was high. Not everyone could do this surgery. Then she walked in. Dr. and Whitmore. A legend in the medical world, known for her unmatched skill but infamous for refusing to operate unless absolutely necessary. For years, she had chosen to remain a consultant, letting others handle the knife. But when she heard the name Ethan Gray, something stirred. "I'll do it," she said firmly, donning her gloves. "Prep the ore. Now." The workers were silent. And accepting this case meant one thing: this man was somebody. The edge of death. Hours went by, past the city outside waiting in breathless anticipation. Lila sat in the waiting room, makeup smudged with tears, pride shattered. Marcus prayed silently, guilt and fear gnawing at his heart. The youngest boy, restless, kept asking over and over again, "Will Dad die?" Reporters packed against the glass, praying for a score. Rival companies held covert meetings, waiting to learn if the king would topple. Ethan held on to the edge of death in the operating room. Dr. and worked with precision, her hand steady, her mind unshakable. Scalpel. Suction. Clamp. "He's losing it. How could you even consider giving up on me, Ethan Gray?" The monitor beeped erratically, and for a sickening moment, the line flatlined. The miracle. Then, beep. 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 The beat returned. Faint but relentless. Dr. and eased back, sweat shining on her forehead. "He's not out of danger yet," she whispered, "but he's fighting. This man doesn't want to die." When the news hit that Ethan had survived surgery, the city exploded in a frenzy of cheer, tears, and prayer. "The invincible king lives," the headlines blared. But the rumors lingered. He did live, yes, but for how long? Would he remain capable of ruling the empire after having been toppled so brutally? The world waited, holding its breath for Ethan's next move. And in the shadows, somewhere, Victor smiled. He had not slain the king, but he had damaged him. And that was sufficient, for now. Scene: the hospital siege. Ethan's recovery was not glamorous. The invincible king lay in a dull white hospital room, stitched and bandaged from a body, strength sapped. Each breath was a battle, each movement a struggle. Outside the glass doors, the world was torn. Others visited, friends willing to show devotion while he was hurt. Others visited to gawk, vultures circling, waiting for the moment to topple the king because blood had been spilled. Azard's board of directors' sessions grew tense. One clique of opportunist directors whispered, "He's vulnerable now. The empire won't survive if the king's handicapped. Perhaps, new times demand new leadership." Scene: Lila's devotion. Lila stood through it all. Day after day, she sat by Ethan's bedside, her hand resting gently on his arm, tears glistening in her eyes for all to see. To the nurses and staff, she painted herself as the devoted wife who had realized her mistakes. "I won't leave his side," she whispered to anyone who would listen. "I was foolish once, but I'll never abandon him again." But Ethan knew better. Although weak, although stitched and hurt, he still managed to read her too well. Her eyes weren't full of devotion. They were full of calculation. She wasn't staying for love. She was staying because she was desperate. Because if Ethan was brought back, she wanted to be seen at his side. And if he died, she wanted to say she had been his best friend until the end. Scene: the Whisper Campaign. Meanwhile, enemies slithered like snakes. A rival conglomerate provided tips to the press. Ethan Gray, alive but maybe never walking right again. The Azard's empire has no master. Investors prepare for a transfer of power. Inside the hospital, rumor circulated like poison. Gossipy nurses stalked the wards. Paparazzi shadowed staff. Even some Azard's board members appeared in suits, pretending to visit Ethan but surreptitiously assessing his condition, weighing odds of seizing control. Scene: Ethan's resolve. Late at night, when everyone thought him sleeping, Ethan opened his eyes. His body ached, his stitches pulled, but his mind was a razor. He had heard the gossip. He had seen Lila's crocodile tears. He knew that his enemies circled him like vultures, ready to strike at his crown. And though his body was broken, his will was not. They think I'm finished, he thought, his eyes burning with cold fire. But I'll be back. More powerful. More ruthless. More deadly. And when I do, there will be no pardon. He closed his eyes, willing the darkness of night to claim him. Time would bring healing. But his return would rock the city to its very core. Scene, a midnight visit. The hospital at night was quiet, the corridors dark, the machine's steady beeping in Ethan's room. Most of the visitors had gone home, even Lila having retreated to a nearby lounge after having put on her daily show of doting care. But one person slipped unseen through the door. Marcus. He closed it softly behind him, his hands stuffed into his pockets, his eyes red from worry. He walked over to his father's bedside, staring at the men who seemed so unbreakable yet now lay bandaged and pale. For a long moment, he just stood there. Then, with a shaky breath, he whispered, "Dad. I'm sorry." Ethan's eyes opened slowly, and though he didn't move much, the faintest curve touched his lips. "You came," Ethan whispered, his voice raw with weakness. Marcus's throat closed up. "Of course I came. I couldn't. I couldn't sleep. I keep going over all the things I did to you, all the things I said, and the way I let Uncle Victor turn it all around. I was stupid." Ethan reached out a trembling hand, and Marcus wrapped both his hands around it. "You were lied to," Ethan whispered. "But you're here now. That's all that matters. And you're braver than you know." Marcus swallowed, his eyes welling with tears. "I don't care what other people think anymore. I know you. You're my father. And I'm proud to say that." Ethan shut his eyes, letting the warmth of his son's words penetrate to his bone. It was the first real balm against the bitter tempest that had encircled him. Scene, the younger son's corruption. Meanwhile, as Marcus was moving closer to his father in secret, the younger son, Adrian, was falling deeper and deeper under Lila's influence. Day by day, Lila told him lies in his ear, painting a picture of Ethan as cold and unloyal and of Victor as the men who had tried to protect their family. "Your father is too busy seeking power to care about us," she whispered kindly to him. "Victor may have done the wrong thing, but he was there when we needed him. Don't forget that." Adrian was young and impressionable, so he nodded at her words. Ethan remained distant from him, while his mother was always present. The distance between the brothers grew wider with each passing day. Scene, Victor recaptured. But fate had a last surprise up its sleeve. Victor, drunk with his brief taste of freedom, had gone into hiding after stabbing Ethan, believing he'd murdered the king. But Ethan's soldiers were unforgiving. It happened at dawn. Victor was cornered in an abandoned warehouse, his disguise torn to shreds, his knife hitting the ground. "Game's over, Victor," growled Ethan's men, slamming him onto the pavement. "The king still lives. And he requires you back in your rightful position." Victor was dragged, furious and snarling, back into custody. His recapture appeared on all front pages. Failed assassin Victor James captured, to serve life sentence. The city buzzed with relief, yet with awe. Despite an attempt on his life, Ethan's power hadn't shattered. His foes were falling like leaves, and he, recovering yet silent, overshadowed more than ever. Lila's last gambit. Hospital games. Lila sits steadfastly beside Ethan's bed, acting the devoted wife, worrying over him, spoon-feeding soup to him, acting the martyr. To the rest of the world, she recounts her tale: "I never left his side, even when the king was dying." Her crocodile tears impress some, the young son in particular, who starts to like her again. Manipulating Marcus, Lila tells Marcus, "See what your dad's pride did. Almost killed him. We should be a family again, together." However, Marcus is not deceived. He is too traumatized by the wound and already has his eyes open, so in secret he warns Ethan. Luring Ethan in with his vulnerability, at night, half asleep on morphine, Lila quietly whispers in his ear, "You need me, you always have. Who else hung on when the world wanted to bury you?" She even stages tender, family moments with the children before him, seeking to penetrate his frozen defenses. Ethan's unspoken determination. Despite his frailty, Ethan gazes at her with that piercing predator stare. He doesn't fight back yet. He lets her believe she's in charge. What Lila does not know is that Anne, the famous doctor, and Marcus have been updating him on her every move. Victor's shadow. Meanwhile, news of Victor's capture spreads. To Ethan, it's confirmation. The jackals remain vigilant, but he'll rise again. To Lila, it's panic, because if Victor speaks out, her complicity in standing with him will be revealed. Hospital room. The reunion. The room was quiet, machines humming softly as Ethan slept. The medicine kept his body heavy, but his mind alert, sharp as ever despite weakness. Suddenly he sensed movement, lightest of footsteps, slow, almost too refined for the dash of a nurse. Ethan rolled over and opened his eyes. A woman stood beside his bed, tall, lovely in her white jacket, her loveliness radiating even beneath the harsh fluorescent lighting. For a moment, he believed he was dreaming. "Who?" he started, his voice coarse. She held up a hand, softly. "Shoo. It's me." Instant recognition leapt like lightning. His eyes flew wide. "Anne." Her soft smile confirmed him. "Yes, Ethan. It's been an eternity, hasn't it?" He blinked hard, not believing. Flashbacks flooded back, two children in a foster home, snuggled under tattered blankets and dreaming of their futures. She always said she would be a doctor. He had sworn to her he'd become someone indomitable, someone who could not be discarded anymore. "You," his voice cracked a little, but he struggled it into firmness. "You did become a doctor. As you wished." "Of course," she said, her voice firm, gentle, reassuring. "And after I heard what had happened to you, I couldn't possibly leave. I knew it was do or die, and I couldn't let you die young, Ethan. Not you." His throat tightened, but he nodded, the king boy for a moment. "Thank you ever so much, Anne," he whispered. His hand went up, shaking but firm, and he took hers gently in a grip. "You saved my life. I owe you one." Her eyes grew soft. "No, Ethan. You don't owe me anything. Perhaps this is the universe finally letting us catch up with each other." For the first time since the stabbing, Ethan had more than survival, he had hope. And becomes Ethan's shadow in recovery. And didn't just operate on him and then disappear, she stayed. She took his vitals every day herself, managed his meds, and made sure he ate, even when he had no appetite anymore. She was never far away, never movable, and with genuine concern. When Ethan was no longer able to walk, she sat in the window, reading the newspaper aloud or muttering to him about her hospital shifts. When he shifted restlessly, she talked to him of the boy he once had been, grounding him in recollections of lost innocence lost beneath the battles for control. Lila watched from the corridor glass wall. Her heart was twisted with grief. Inside the room, and leaned over Ethan, gently tucking his blanket when he shifted uncomfortably. The softness in her eyes was unmistakable, not duty, but devotion. A kind of love Lila had never given him. Her nails dug into her palm as the thought hit her like a dagger. Maybe I've really lost him. The pride she had once carried crumbled at the pit of her stomach, replaced with a sour jolt of conscience. She remembered the years she had ridiculed him, jeered at him, belittled his dreams when he stayed loyal. And now another woman, lovely, capable, kind-hearted, stood in her place she never filled. Within, Ethan saw and smiled faintly at him as she wrote notes. Lila quickly glanced away, her chest tight, searing shame and revulsion tearing her apart. Scene, hospital room confrontation. There was a gentle beeping from the machines that filled the peaceful hospital room. Ethan lay half up on the bed, looking pale but resolute, his gaze on the city outside the window. And stood beside him, adjusting his four with tender precision. The door creaked wide with a thud. Lila stepped in, clutching her purse so hard her knuckles whitened. Her eyes snapped to and first, too intimate, too relaxed standing next to Ethan. Lila, snapping. Why are you here? Haven't you done enough already? He doesn't need you, he has me. I'm his wife. Her voice broke over the last word, showing her desperation. And turned slowly, her peaceful face sharper than any razor. Anne, firmly. You were his wife. But you signed those papers yourself. You're divorced. You have no claim here. The words cut through the air. Lila's breath caught in her throat. She stared at Ethan, willing him to deny, to protest, something. But Ethan said nothing. His silence was louder than words. His stubborn face told all, he wasn't going to defend her. Not now. Lila's lip trembled. She fidgeted uncomfortably, pride screaming at her to hold out, but heart heavy with the truth. Lila, whispering, breaking. Ethan, say something, anything. Silence still. His eyes never leaving the horizon. And placed a chart neatly on the floor, her tone icy but not cruel. Anne. It's time you saw things as they are, Miss Lila. He's not yours anymore. Lila's knees nearly buckled. Shame seared her cheeks. For the first time in her life, she had no space to scream, to swear, to posture. She could do nothing but swallow that bitter knot in her throat. Head lowered, she turned reluctantly, heels clicking faintly against the floor. Before the door closed, the shadow behind her seemed smaller than ever. Ethan breathed softly, but never spoke. And just stood by his side, constant as ever. Scene, hallway breakdown. The door shut behind her with a firm clunk. Lila leaned against the cold hospital wall, her chest on fire. For the first time in years, she felt no anger within her, only shame. Her knees buckled, and she slid down until she was sitting on the cold floor, hands covering her face. Lila, crying, muffled. What have I done? What have I done? Tears seeped through her fingers, smearing her carefully applied makeup. The woman who once strutted in heels and silenced rooms with her haughtiness now felt like nothing more than a broken shadow. A small hand closed over her shoulder. She startled and looked up. It was Marcus. His bandaged hand trembled as he knelt down beside her. His childish face was wan but determined. Marcus, softly. Mom, don't cry. Please. She pulled him into her embrace, clinging to him as if he was the last solid ground beneath her feet. Lila, voice cracking. I ruined everything, Marcus. I drove him away, and now he does not even want to look at me anymore. Marcus buried his face in her shoulder. His voice could barely be heard. Marcus. Dad isn't like Victor. He's not cruel. But he's done with you, Mom. I can tell. The words hurt more than any knife. She shook her head frantically, crying more. Lila. No, he can't be. I'll fix it. I'll fix everything. But Marcus just hugged her tighter, his silence saying what she would not listen to. Some things could not be fixed. Scene, Ethan's recovery and bonding with Anne. Ethan's first steps outside the hospital were cautious. The world was recognizable and yet odd, the city buzzing around him as his body still ached from the wounds. And was by his side, her presence steady and comforting. She had insisted on taking him home herself, refusing to let him venture out into the outside world alone. Anne, smiling gently. Lean on me. One step at a time. Ethan looked at her, a shadow of a smile tugging at the corner of his lips. She was more than a physician, she was a guardian, a lifeline to a sense of safety he hadn't experienced in years. At home, she kept a close eye on his recovery, cooking nutritious meals, helping him with physiotherapy, and making sure his medications were taken on schedule. Slowly, the pain began to subside, replaced by the warmth of someone genuinely caring. Days turned into weeks, and their bond grew stronger. They shared stories over silent meals, laughter echoing through rooms that had been quiet for so long. And had grown up with him, and that shared past created an unspoken understanding. Ethan, one evening, softly. I don't know how to thank you. You didn't have to stay, to do all this. Anne, teasing lightly. You think I'd let the person I've known my whole life just vanish? You don't owe me anything. And yet, the truth was present in how she looked at him, her hands lingering a second longer when helping him, her eyes burning with a warmth and tenderness that ached in his chest. Their first actual real date was low-key, a quiet evening at a small rooftop restaurant, city lights sparkling below. Ethan, as she laughed. I forgot what peace felt like. Anne. Then let's not forget again. For the first time in years, Ethan allowed himself to heal, not just physically, but emotionally. The betrayals in his past, the traumas, the humiliations, they were all still there, but beside Anne, he felt strong again. He was discovering that love and trust could exist without lies, without strings. And as they walked home that night, side by side, Ethan felt his heart open again, slowly, but gladly, for the first time in a very long time. Lila sat in her high-rise apartment, staring blankly at the city lights outside. Her phone rang incessantly with alarms, breaking news alerts, trending updates, social media mentions. All headlines screamed the same: Ethan Azard, the invulnerable king of Azards. She scrolled crazily through the news clips, her hands trembling. Footage of Ethan walking through the offices of the company, greeting investors with confidence, and attending press conferences with an aura of unbreakable gravitas, each frame a testament that the men she had teased and used had shot far beyond her grasp. Lila, to herself. How could he? Her mind flashed back to the hospital, Anne's presence, the warmth Ethan had accepted without hesitation, his smile when she was there. The image had stoked a firestorm of jealousy and shame deep in Lila's heart. She had tried to manipulate him with their children, with Victor's machinations, with outings in public, but all in vain. Ethan had rebounded, not just from Victor's attacks, but from her manipulations too. Lila's son, reluctantly, softly. "Mom, maybe you should leave him alone. He's different. Anne, she loves him." Lila's chest tightened as rage and desperation fought a rising fear. She couldn't believe it, her own son, who had always obeyed her so readily, was beginning to see through the lies. Lila, coarsely, standing up. "No. It isn't done. He's mine. He's always been mine." She began making plans to continue her campaign, contacting former friends, calling social clubs, attempting to sully Anne's reputation quietly, and plotting to reinsert herself into Ethan's life. Each attempt, however, was met with polite rejection, or icy rejection, because society had begun to consider Ethan off-limits, a king who had risen from betrayal and shame stronger than ever. Even Victor, her erstwhile supporter, was powerless now. Locked up behind bars, and his conspiracy exposed, all he could do was begrudge, and leave Lila to fight alone. Lila's desperation was high, but as time passed, the social media frenzy, the gossip, and the fanfare for Ethan made her realize one sour truth: she had lost him, irrevocably. She could wheedle, beg, or threaten, and it all went over his head. And perhaps worst of all, the very individuals who had fawned over her money and influence now whispered of her failure, pitting it against Ethan's rise. She was becoming a parable, a cautionary tale of pride and treachery. Lila, whispering to herself in desperation. I won't let him have her. I won't. I'll find a way." But in her desperation, she was overlooking a crucial reality: the further down she went, the stronger Ethan's presence became, not as a corporate figure, but as a man who had endured betrayal, humiliation, and death, and emerged standing. And with Anne, not only was Ethan made whole, but he had found a mate whose loyalty and faithfulness could never be bought, deceived, or manipulated. Lila strode the limits of her apartment, tossing her phone onto the couch in anger. Her carefully laid plans, diplomatic social jibes, rumors of scandal, hints of threats, had all come up short. Ethan's name was commanding the headlines, his face untarnished, and in standing by him only serving to solidify the public impression of his strength and stability. Lila, fuming, cursing. Why won't he take the bait? Why doesn't he? Her other son peeked in, worried. "Mom, you should give up, he's content now, and everyone respects him." Lila whirled around, her eyes blazing. "Give up? Give up? No. This isn't over. If I can't have him, no one will, no one." She decided to take it up a notch. Her first wild attempt was a high society ball, one to which Ethan had been invited by, and Lila stormed in, arrayed in her most assertive finery, intent on publicly displaying dominance over Ethan's new identity. But the plan went awry immediately. Journalists, aware of Ethan's triumphant rise and Anne's role in that victory, swarmed him for interviews and photos, leaving Lila standing alone. Attendees would whisper of her desperation. Her son's arrival, meant to sway sympathy, only served to highlight her diminishing grip on power. Reporter, whispering to another. Isn't that his ex-wife? Wow. She looks enraged. Every camera flash and whisper reinforced Ethan's aura as inaccessible, unruffled, commanding, and respected. Lila's anger seethed as the people around her appeared to recede, leaving her socially isolated. Then she attempted to brainwash the children. She invited them in for a weekend, hoping to push them away from Ethan and subvert Anne's position surreptitiously. But her oldest son, secretly making amends with Ethan, respectfully denied her lies, and even the younger son did not go out of his way to assist her. Eldest son, firmly, to Lila. Mom, you did it with me before. You can't do it again. Dad is not your puppet to play with. Shamed, Lila saw her carefully constructed world crashing down around her. Social media saw glimpses from witnesses, friends who had watched the children's uprising, and trending tweets mocked Lila's unsuccessful attempts at controlling Ethan. Even Victor's whispers of strategy from prison were useless. He could only watch her desperation grow, powerless to act, as Ethan's power and influence continued to ascend. Lila's second attempt, a showdown at the office, trying to nail down Ethan and get him to confess her, was unsuccessful. Anne, ever vigilant, stood by Ethan serenely. When Lila got near him, he uttered nothing, hard and unshakable. Anne's unspoken authority only served to highlight Lila's vulnerability, and the company workers who watched in hushed tones, taped on phones and broadcast on the web, contributed to her humiliation. By the weekend, Lila was a social pariah, gossiped about in the tabloids, snickered at parties, and branded as a jealousy-driven, desperate woman. Ethan's public reputation, meanwhile, soared even higher. Each attempt she made to fight her way back into his life only served to make him more unapproachable. Lila, sobbing in her car, alone. I can't. I've lost him, and everyone knows it. Even her son, who had previously been her strength, now sat in stunned silence beside her, realizing that the woman he had once idolized was crumbling before his very eyes. Scene, Lila's regret and collapse. Lila slumped into the plush bar stool, shaking as she gulped down the drink. The clinking of glasses and laughter around her were a bitter reminder of her own defeat. All the news broadcasts, the Facebook updates, the sidelong glances and disbelieving whispers regarding Ethan and Anne, regarding their undeniable chemistry and growing affection, played over and over in her head like a maddening circle. She had lost him. The man she had belittled, manipulated, and scorned was successful, adored, and out of reach. And it wasn't just his power that tormented her, it was the gentle affection and the smile Ethan offered her, how his children revered him, and how readily he gained respect and loyalty. Lila, whispering to herself, trembling. I've lost him. I can never get him back. I was so blind. Hours of reckless drinking finally caught up with her. Her vision began to blur, her chest felt constrained, and she collapsed onto the floor, gasping for air. When her anxious youngest son and security personnel at the building found her, she was barely conscious. She was rushed to the hospital, admitted immediately under observation. The cruel fluorescent lighting of the hospital room was unforgiving, mirroring the cruel reality she now had to accept. Lila, who had been so confident and cunning, now lay weak and at the mercy of others. Her physical body was betraying her, her arrogance stripped, leaving her with nothing but cold regret. She summoned her sons, her voice frail but insistent. I need to tell you something. The two youths, having seen her frail condition, huddled by her bedside. Her voice trembled as she continued. Lila, whispering. I was wrong about your father, about everything. I turned you both against him. I was ungrateful, cruel. He was always kind to us, to you, to me. You must love him, respect him, if I don't get another chance. Her eldest son gently took her hand, holding back the tears. Mom, it's okay. We know what occurred now. We've forgiven Dad. She closed her eyes, a tear sliding down her cheek, and for the first time actually accepted the price of what she had done. She realized that Ethan, the man she had despised and tried to control, was a gem she had lost forever, out of reach and content with someone who truly appreciated him. Outside of the hospital, the world was still buzzing with news of Ethan's empire, his growing power, and his successful life with Lila, who had once sat at the center of it all, now understood what she had lost. Her children promised to honor her final wish, to treat and respect the father they had wronged. And in that quiet, sorrowful moment, Lila finally understood the enormity of her mistakes. Her health, pride, and family bonds were falling apart, and all that was left for her was regret. Lila, whispering to herself, fading away. I don't deserve him. I never did, but I hope my children do. Scene: Ethan's untouchable status and the final closure. Days had passed after Lila's stay in the hospital. The city still buzzed with the news of Ethan Hazard, the one who had been rejected, mocked, and underrated but now stood at the pinnacle of power, esteem, and admiration. His business was thriving, his children were growing well in his custody, and by his side was Anne, the lady who had shared his past, saved his life, and now occupied his heart. At the Hazard estate, there was love and warmth. Ethan moved with quiet confidence, still the level-headed figure that commanded respect. Marcus and the youngest child were his proudest successes. Marcus, once misguided, now shone with happiness as he watched his father guide the family enterprise with wisdom and integrity. The youngest brother, who had once been at the mercy of Lila's manipulations, clung to Ethan's side, finally understanding whom his true guardian and guide was. And was always there, counseling, gentle, and loving. From early morning breakfasts to midnight meetings, she never left him. Theirs had become a natural relationship, built on faith, dedication, and shared history. As a team, they were unbeatable, a mix of power and heart, flawless as it was. The city watched in awe as Ethan's wedding aired on live television. The news went viral, dominating headlines and social media. Everyone waited eagerly for the guy who had been shamed, mocked, and belittled, to be now celebrated as invincible, untouchable, and irresistibly powerful. In a quiet hospital room, Lila sat and watched the wedding on television, her body weak but her mind wide awake. Tears ran down her face as she sat and observed Ethan laugh, smile, and be truly happy for the first time in years. Every expression of love between him and Anne cut her with the truth she was now unable to deny. He had moved on, he had found peace, happiness, and family in a way that she was never capable of offering for him. For the first time, Lila confronted the reality she had managed to shun for so long. She lost the men she used to dominate, control, and spurn. The guilt bore down on her like a lead weight on her chest, and all she could do was stand idly by and observe as the men she never valued flourished beyond anything she could have ever thought. Lila, whispering, crying. He's happy, he's finally happy, and I lost him. The camera lingered on Ethan's radiant grin, his arm encircling Anne's, the children flanking them on each side, and the city's adoration emanating from each frame. The story of shame, manipulation, and duplicity had come full circle, not with anarchy and vengeance, but triumph, love, and irreversible authority. Lila brushed away her tears, sensing the seriousness of her choices and the enormity of her loss. She could no longer reach out and touch Ethan's life, his happiness, or the love he had built. For the first time in years, she finally understood he was untouchable, not due to money or prestige in and of themselves, but due to the honor, strength, and love no one, not even she, could ever take away from him. The legacy of Hazard. Sunlight streamed through the tall windows of the Hazard home, illuminating the room in golden warmth. Ethan strode in his office, poring over blueprints for the next step of the firm, a gentle smile playing on his lips. Humiliation, treason, and uncertainty no longer troubled him. The only burden he carried was the self-assured authority of a man who had fought, endured, and won. Marcus sat beside him, silently writing notes, asking pointed questions, and learning the intricacies of the empire that was now his birthright in spirit. The older son, once so lost, now admired his father not only as a father but as a hero and mentor. Ethan would catch his eye from time to time, his face stern but gentle, reminding him that he was proud, the boy's previous errors forgiven and forgotten. The youngest of the sons came racing into the room with a beaming smile, waving in his hand a tiny model airplane that he had constructed. "Dad, see. I want to learn to handle the logistics for our new office." Ethan smiled and tousled his hair. "You'll pick it up in no time, just like Marcus. Both of you are going to be unstoppable." And slipped in unnoticed, her presence calm and warm. She wrapped her arm around Ethan's, nestling her head against his shoulder. You've accomplished so much, Ethan, for the company, for the boys, for yourself, she breathed. He looked at her, his eyes gleaming with appreciation and love. And I've done it with you here beside me. You've always been my anchor. The children smiled, seeing their parents unite, seeing the love and trust they once thought impossible. Marcus turned to his little brother and whispered, "Dad's great, and Mom is perfect for him." The Azard family flourished from then on. The halls, once filled with fear and tension, rang with laughter. The children prospered with a father now an unbending pillar of integrity and love and a mother the embodiment of care and strength. In the city, Ethan Azard's name remained unsullied. The media dubbed him the Invincible King, yet his sons and knew the truth. His greatest victory was not riches or fame, but the family, love, and loyalty he had eventually earned. And in the quietude of instants, when the empire slept and the world's uproar far away, Ethan allowed himself to appreciate what he had gained: happiness, security, and the unbreakable bond of a complete family at last. The Azards had been reborn, not as a name of wealth alone, but as an emblem of boldness, love, and lasting power. The end.